to Ascension Incubator, a place for the curious soul, exploring what it means to be here in this world. As we explore philosophies and ideals, and we break them down as part of our evolutionary journey to self. The forever learning that we do. Welcome to Ascension Incubator, everybody. How are we this Friday evening? Wonderful to connect with everybody again. I don't know about you, but hasn't time just gone like super fast? I felt like the last one that I did was the last session that I did was completely, like, literally felt like it was yesterday. So, and this is what's been actually really, really interesting, I think, in our times right now. I don't know if you've noticed it. I've certainly noticed it, that we are speeding up in time. We're already halfway through the year. And in that space of speeding up, I feel like it's almost like we're not speeding up time per se, because it's just our perception of time. It is. My dog is knocking on the door now, so hopefully if my partner's watching this, she'll come and grab her. Please. So I don't interrupt our session. But yeah, anyway, so the concept of time is a really interesting one, I think, because we feel like time's speeding up, but I look at it in a different way, whereby we are evolving more as stepping into our next evolution of self, if you want to call it, the fifth dimensional self, or whatever you want to call it. I feel like what's happening is we're actually stepping into the true flow of time, and our essence of how we measured time was based on an old ideal, which is why in some ways it feels like it's speeding up, but it's actually not. We're the ones that are, I think, speeding up in our evolutionary spiritual journey, and also with what's actually happening. What's happening in the world at the moment. I mean, with great change comes a lot of, blood, sweat and tears. And so, when we go through change, it is breaking out of that pre-existing shell of self, and it breaks away, and it kind of hurts. And I feel like that's sort of where we are at the moment, and why we feel that the time is just moving very quickly, or our preconceived concept of time. Whereas, we can actually, it's probably slow it down and at some level. Oh, she made it in. Hello. Here she is. This is my little fluff. Thank you. Hopefully she'll stay still. Say hello. No, she's going to hide behind me. Dogs and children are the two things on live that you have no idea what's going to happen, so just let's go with it. So welcome again to our Friday night session of Ascension Incubator, where we cover off on some concepts and philosophies of self and evolution as part of my gift to you through this period of time that we are in humanity, which some would say is actually a historical time that we are facing, and it will be one for the books, where people will look back and think, wow, that was a pinnacle moment in the human evolution. And I feel like we're right in the middle of it right now. And so tonight's session and these sessions are really all about supporting you through that, whether it be a particular topic that might assist in being that bridge for you into feeling a better sense of peace, or feeling that sense of letting something go that has been weighing you down. Or that's really my wish in this, sort of in this kind of journey of self. Let me just fix my mop. So today's session is an interesting one. I wanted to look at, and this was gifted to me as most topics I talk about come through people that I liaise with or I connect with This particular one was through my spiritual elder, who love dearly, and has sent me this article, and I thought, actually this would be a really interesting topic for us to talk about. And it was an article in the Waking Times, and it was a question of what our time, that we're in a space and time of personal responsibility. But then I wanted to take it a little bit further and talk about spiritual responsibility, because we are in this new age phenomenon, if you like, and there is this essence of how do we remain grounded in what is, in many respects becoming it's becoming, I don't know if I want to say the word fad, but it's becoming something that more and more people, and I think it's a great thing, but it's how do we sit within that space of this perceived new ageness and the spirituality of the things that we learn. How do we step into a space of being grounded in our perception of being what it means to be spiritual, and if you're watching and engaging, and hit us up with a comment about what you think it means to you to be spiritual. And what I want to be able to apply, I think one thing about me as a person that I've taken as a signature in my life is being very grounded. I like the practicality of things, so bringing practicality and spirituality together to meet in the middle has been a bit of a journey for me. I've had to go from one pendulum swing to the other to experience the both extremes. So, I went from working in the highest of highest corporate environments and the biggest boardrooms in Australia, stilettos, the hair, the suit, all of that, nothing absolutely wrong with that. But that was it was very much a space of fast times. It was noisy. There was lots of devices. There was a lot of distractions. It was all go, 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 and it was all about a persona that we had to portray in that environment. Whilst I reveled in it and I loved being in that environment, I started my first business when I was like 8 years old. So I've always been inherently, I suppose, interested in it, but that's also because of, my mother was very in the 80s. In her time, she was a businesswoman, and really smart, and still is. And she, I suppose, I looked up to that as a young girl and saw this powerful woman in a suit walk out the door, and I was like, whoa, this is amazing. She's like superwoman, and she kind of is, but for me, that was kind of the programming, if you like, of when we are in that age of what we choose to be. And by 8 years old, I had already created my first business. So the business world and the corporate environment for me was I was very adapt to it. I had a high level of business acumen. I built multi-million-dollar companies and charities, and I was, in that space and in that time vortex, if you like, of intensity. And anyone that works in that environment knows what I'm talking about. It is literally results driven, how fast, productivity, bottom line, profit. And whilst we all understand that is what makes a business tick, it needed to be, for me, there was something missing, and there needed to be something more than that. And I think it was by about the age of 21 or 22, I had, just before I stepped into starting to become, creating businesses and stepping into the business space, I was working in a corporate environment, and the exploration, the way it first started was through angel cards. And it was kind of when one of my friends had some angel cards, and I'm like, what are they? And then she started talking to me about it, and her mum was a medium, and I'm like, what's a medium? And so when I started, it was, I probably started my journey a long time ago, but I didn't have the language for it at the time. And so when I started experiencing it, I was like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, I understand these experiences. And so that began the journey of the pendulum swing. And if anybody is going through that, they understand that pendulum swing. Sometimes we need to go to the contrast of the opposite in order for us to understand, find that leveling in the middle somewhere. We need to have the contrast to understand who it is we want to be in the next version or the upgraded version of self, and what parts of us we're going to take with us in that journey. And so this began the journey for me. It was a very interesting path, and little did I know how profoundly deep it would go and how far it would take me. I was, for many years, probably about 15 odd years, in building companies and businesses and sitting at boardroom tables, often as the youngest woman at the table at the time, and I was leading the way with an industry that hadn't really saturated the market at that point. And so I was, in this environment of the fast-paced world and the fast-paced money and the fast people and the fast food, and all of that was fast. Everything was fast. And it got to me to a point, and at the same time, I was just dabbling and exploring the world of spirituality and what it meant. And I remember when I got to a point where I decided that, and it was also not me deciding, it was universal balance that came into play, where everything I had built effectively was going to completely change on its head. And it would throw me into the journey from the head to the heart. And I was very much in that space of the head space, and moved into the heart space, kicking and screaming at some point, because I remember very vividly when I was very much in the business world and very disconnected from, and not to say that people in the business world are, but this was my journey, is that I was very disconnected because I was so much in the head space of what it is I needed to do, what it is I needed to be, who it is I needed to impress, and what client it was I needed to do this, and what presentation from here to there. There were times when I would sleep in the car. I'd sleep under a boardroom table in between because I was getting migraines, and I would sleep and roll up my jacket and use that as a pillow and sleep between board meetings. That's how intense everything was for me. And I would sleep in the back of the car and then go to my next meeting if I was getting a migraine, which were really common for me during that time. And so through that journey, it was as universal balance comes into play, it brought about balance in my life, which would then begin the journey to the heart. But in order for me to do that, it was always there. Was for me to be able to almost break down the preconceived notions of who it is I thought I was meant to be. And so the journey began. And I went through that contrast, and I think where I'm at now is kind of that pendulum swing from one extreme to the other. And I went the whole way. I committed the whole way, and I copped a lot of flack from the business world, and people were thinking that I'd had breakdowns and that things were wrong with me, and they didn't understand what was happening to me. Some of them would say, you turning into a hippie? What's going on? And all these things were happening, and I went the whole extreme to the other end. And then it brought me back full circle. So what happened was I went on a journey to self, and it was that journey of source, but I had to go through the two contrasting opposites to be able to understand that. And being, vaguely aware at the time that that's what I was doing, because I knew my personality type. So I knew that I took it to the extreme, because I always like to eliminate any possibility of curiosity. So if I'm curious about something, I go and just figure it all out and go into it and feel it and experience it. And then that way I've got no more curiosity, and I'm like, okay, yeah, done that, cool. So that was, my philosophy. I went to the extreme, and I drowned myself in Palo Santos, and I, did circles and meditations and, sound healings and healings, everything. And that's not to say any of these things aren't amazing, but I was overdosing on it. And so this is leading into where I'm going with spiritual responsibility, because it's almost like when I came back to balance in the middle, and it was almost perfect, because I had the capacity to be able to have that opposite of the groundedness and the complete opposite of the life that I was now experiencing. But what it was able to help me do was to have that wider picture, that observatory deck perception of what was flowing and what was happening in my life, and how it was able to ground me. So everything in its essence and in our path is perfect. When we look back, it makes so much more sense. So when I looked back, I went, oh, okay, so that's why I experienced that, and that helps me in this aspect of my life, and that's helped ground me in this element of my life. And I think the beauty about that journey of the contrasting elements of going from head to heart, let's call it, but also it's about going from that head space to the spirituality space, and then we again do what humans do best, and we institutionalize a belief system. And I was beginning to watch this become an institutionalized sort of belief system of, and there was this sort of spiritual ego starting to unveil itself in front of me. And then it was about who's more spiritual than the other, and how much meditation are you doing? And I was thinking, this is really not what I inherently feel that this is what it is meant to be about. Ultimately, the work is done without an audience. It's done in the quietness of our own homes. It's, it's done in a space where we don't share and we don't tell people, or we share with those closest to us who might be our advisors or peers. But what I'm saying is that in what I started to see was the commercialization of that space. And I saw a lot of new sets of masks. So it was really interesting to go from the boardroom to let's say, a yoga room. So, to move from the boardroom, it felt like there were plenty of masks. And the term personality actually comes from the word persona, which means masks. And we all use them because that's our survival instinct. But what was interesting was I could feel the inauthentic nature of certain things in the boardroom environment, and I could see the energetic playouts going on. And when I would then be, say, in the yoga room, I would see the same thing, but just in a different light. And it was this play out of, and I sort of, I see and feel it. So I sort of energetically see it, and then I also feel it, and I watch body language and all these other elements. It's kind of like a little computer in my head. It's a party in there, and it's like it's kind of just, and it gives me this rounded approach as to what is actually going on, and the essence of truth, which is actually going to be one of my topics at our live workshop session on the 26th of July, is about truth. Because, there's universal truth, and then there's your truth. And it's a really interesting journey. So this sort of got me onto the topic of what this article in the Waking Times was about, which was about taking that personal responsibility, and how elements of our personal responsibility relate to the higher level of our collective consciousness. There's a great saying that says, I think it was from the Native American Indians, that said that, what we do to the web, humanity is like a web, and what we do to the web, we do to ourselves. With every thread that we impact the collective. And I'm sort of paraphrasing there. But in essence, what it was saying is, what we do to ourselves at an individual level impacts the collective. And I think the same applies within our spiritual practices. I like to explain it like this. We kind of, as I got through my journey and went from the two extremes and then found the place resting in the middle, I realized that, we were kind of like in the spiritual world, humans were kind of like kids in a candy shop. And we were like picking things off the shelf and eating too much until we got sick. And then, it was just this indulgence of newness, and this indulgence of unknowingness, of not knowing the ramifications of the choices that we make, because we think that it's shiny and new, or we think that it's something we don't see, therefore it's not as real. And I started to watch those playouts occur. And it kind of felt like as a collective, we didn't really know what it was we were playing with in the spiritual world. And then that brought in the narrative for me of spiritual discernment, and practicing that spiritual discernment, because it affects how other people practice their spiritual discernment. And it's not to play down certain elements of modalities, but it's really trusting in that internal GPS system that you have, that you inherently have, and allowing that to guide you into the path of truth. Because remember, your truth is different to other people's truth. So you might go to a session and 20 people would say, that's amazing. And then but you're sitting there going, well, hang on, I didn't connect with that. There was something that wasn't right. That didn't feel right for me. But it doesn't make it wrong for the 20 other people. It's having that maturity of spiritual maturity going, well, okay, I'm practicing my discernment now. Something in that didn't feel right in my body. I don't exactly know what it is, because we are kids in a candy shop and we don't really know what we're playing with here. So I need to practice the same level of discernment that I practice when I am in the human world. So human versus spirit, right? Even though they're joined, let's separate them for the purpose of this exercise. Human versus spirit. So when you are in the human world and you're engaging with people, think about your practice with that. Think about the intuition that you play with that. So when you meet someone, you kind of go, yeah, I'm not too sure about them. Or you practice discernment, you weigh them up, you figure out, you kind of get an idea of who they are, or you get that sense. And Malcolm Gladwell has a book called Blink, which is a wonderful, I suppose, a wonderful summary of how to apply that. When you meet someone, it's in that first blink moment that usually you're right. How many of us have done that? Where you've met someone and you're like, oh, and then you go, oh, that's okay. And then your head starts convincing yourself, that's fine, it's probably this and probably that and probably that. And then time passes and then it unveils. And as truth does, in some way, shape or form, it comes to the surface. And this happens, and then you're like, damn it, I knew that already, but I don't know why I didn't follow that. I don't know why I can't, and then you beat yourself up. I'm too trusting. I shouldn't do this. Kind of this whole journey happens with this part of us identifying that truth and engaging in how we are with in our human interactions, right? So these things happen. They teach us, we refine. They teach us, we refine. They teach us, we refine. We rinse, we repeat. We rinse, we repeat, until we get to a point in our human interaction with other people that we are practicing discernment. So we get a sense of that person. We weigh it up. We use what we know in our past. We utilize the things, or we trust our intuition. Really, it shouldn't be elements of everything outside of ourselves. It should be the elements of our intuition, which is built through our experience of life, our experience of the soul. And as we tune in more with that, we get to our truth. Again, it's just your truth. It doesn't make it true for everyone else. So pause there. That's how we do the human stuff, right? And that's how we interact with, and it's quite natural for us to practice that discernment. We walk into a room, we meet someone, and this doesn't feel right. Don't know what it is. It doesn't feel right. That's the discernment of how we interact on the human level. Now, we need to play that in the spiritual level. So when we are dealing with anything that is spiritual, we practice the same level of discernment. We first of all build that discernment muscle through experience. So like how I went through the pendulum swing, I went through to the total opposite end. And as I did that, I learned the capacity of what it was that felt right and what it was that didn't for me. And as I did that, it built that attitude, that sort of spiritual discernment muscle, if you like. And as I did that, I am now at a place where I really trust that. And when I am dealing with anything that is in the spiritual bubble of the spiritual world, new age world, whatever it is, I practice that same discernment. And also with, if I am, working, or if I'm connecting in with source, or I get some kind of guidance of some sort, I still practice discernment with that guidance. I don't take it as gospel straight away. And you always know the difference. And as nowadays, I know I can pick up whether it's source or whether it's something else. And that comes with practice as you do that more and more and more. And so as we do this, we are also acting as a bridge for other people to do the same, because it's, beyond the scene. It happens and it creates a ripple effect. And this is the concept, I suppose, of that spiritual responsibility. Now, in this article particularly, it said in the Gnostic Gospel of Thomas, it is written that Jesus pronounced, "There is light within a man of light, and it lights up the whole world. If he does not shine, there is darkness. Furthermore, if you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, what you do not bring forth will destroy you." And so basically this is, teaching us that each person has within them, they can bring insight, conscious awareness, experiential knowing onto contemporary issues and also their distress. And it's essential that they bring the inner world to bear onto the physical material world. So it's how do we bring those two together? You see, both realms need to participate in congruence. And this is what it says in the article that was written by Kingsley Dennis. Wonderful article. And he says in there that each person has a responsibility not only to the outer world, but also to their individual inner life. And I love that, because that really is that concept of the web, the web that we interconnect with. So as we work on our inner life, and this is actually something that has always been a bit of an observation, if you like, of spiritualness and the spiritual realm, is that we do work on the inner selves, right? But sometimes, and this is where we begin, when the human egoic aspect comes into play, where we start turning in so much that it becomes narcissistic. That's the discernment I'm talking about. Where are you finding that you can have inner reflection and inner connection, but do it with spatial awareness of what's happening around you and the people that you impact? Because sometimes I've seen this and I've experienced it firsthand. It's like, no, I'm going within. This is my stuff, or no, that's your stuff, and I need to be with myself right now. And I'm like, well, okay, that's fine, but what ends up happening is that we are disconnecting from the physical reality of what it means to be human. For example, illness, chronic illness, that you go through the Western world and there's the Western options, and then you go into the Eastern world. There's a million different options in sort of the alternative therapies. And then you sort of go and meet with someone you've been going for ages, and you still can't get to the source of it. And they say to you, you need to just be with your body and be with the pain, and you've gone through years of chronic pain. And I'm speaking from experience with this. And at that point in time, it's not about that. You know that it's definitely a physical thing. It's something in the body, and there's something more here that you need to find. How do we get the coherence between the spiritual and the physical, and not go all the way over there and forget and disconnect from the aspect of the practicality that we're human beings. And I've seen this so often where, they float off into the world, into the spiritual world, and that's wonderful if that's what they want to do, but there's a lack of groundedness that happens, and I see it come undone time and time again in them. And then they start to feel ungrounded, and then there's something that the universe might give to them for them to learn this balance and to bring that balance of awareness to self. And that's the challenge, I think, that we as a culture, or as a human family, are needing to learn whilst on this planet, is how do we bring the two worlds together? We don't go too far to one and too far to the other. Where do we find the balance? And if we don't have that balance, and we, in many respects, like it was said, that if we don't bring forth what is within us, then what we don't bring forth will destroy you. Well, that is the element of that balance. So when it's out of balance, it comes up in some form, shape, in some way, and it brings us into balance. And for me, it's been with a big 4x2 across the head. It's been like, she's not listening, let's boom. And it's been really like full on, that it balances you, it balances your perspective, and you get to see the opposing side of the coin. You see, with the opposing side of each coin, you've got a bit in the middle that joins it. That bit in the middle that joins the heads and the tails of a coin is the bit, the path, the bridge that each of us individually are learning to create, because as we create that bridge, we then become that bridge to someone else, and we teach them what we've done. And we pass that on, it's that typical hero's journey, as we pass on that elixir, that medicine of what it is we've learned. And as we evolve through that, we start to build a stronger bridge, and then we can walk between both worlds. We can have and understand, and I've done this in a business environment where I've gone from flew across to a board meeting and flew back, and it was, the board meeting was a 6-hour board meeting, and I was one of the directors of this $400 million company, a director on the board. And then the next day I'm running a sound healing, and I'm thinking, yeah, right, okay, I'm getting this bridge. And it's like knowing when to do the dance between the two, you see, and that's what makes life interesting. It becomes so much more rich. The experiences that we have become so much more rich because we are experiencing both sides of that world, you see. And as we do that, we are building that bridge. And as we do that bridge, like I said, we pass it on to other people. And as we do that as a collective, then we become more and more, I suppose, discerning in how we operate in those two realms. And so as we do that, it's one of these things, we learn and we fall, and we learn and we fall, and we try again, and we learn and we fall. And it's understanding that we have the sustenance and the experience to be able to start practicing that both in the spiritual world and the New Age world, and the practical applications of self. So what does that look like? Let me give you some practical things of what that might look like. And the only way I can give you that is what I do in my day. So my day might start with, with a prayer, with meditation, a bit of yoga, and I take care of my dog, and I have some time with my partner in the morning, and then basically my mornings are blocked out. And then after that, then I get into work, and I'll do my business work. But what I'll do as well is use my internal compass as I'm working. I'll go, okay, and I actually ask to be guided as to where it is you want me to be today. Who do you want me to talk to today, and where can I be of service? And I trust that once I've put that out there and I've asked that I will show up wherever it is that I am meant to be called to. The more I did that, as opposed to trying to control my day as to how I think it should be, and that by 9 a.m. I should be doing this, I should be working from 9 till 5, and then I'll switch off at 5, and then I'll go home and I'll do this, and I threw all that out the window, and I started to work with that intuitive flow. And this is the dance between our physical and our spiritual selves. How do we practice practical spirituality and be in a world of doing? And so I would allow myself to be guided through that. And I would trust that guidance. The more I trusted it, the stronger it got. And, there is one of the things that I was going to cover in this was the topic of freedom, because as we do that, we start to feel a sense of freedom within our experiences. We feel that sense of freedom and I have felt that in my work, and I still run. I've got a couple of businesses that I run, and I do a lot of different things. I wear a lot of different hats, but they're strategically chosen hats. I have certain hats that I wear. I still dabble in the corporate world, and I bring what I now do here with meditation, and I run workshops, and I do sound work, and I bring all that now into the boardrooms. So now all of a sudden I'm sitting in the boardrooms with a crystal bowl. Imagine how that's like. And I bring the elements of the practicality of it. So when I teach them, and I don't just go straight into it. I teach about the science behind it and what happens with the body and I meet them where they're at, so then they can hear and experience something they've probably never experienced in their life. And usually at the tail end of that, when they go through this meditative process with sound, they come out of it feeling amazing. Like I have so many great results from that. And so that is sort of that dance, if you like. So I'm still working in the space of whatever it is that you're in the space of, that you are here to be of service, because ultimately that's what we are here to do. We're here to serve. We're here to serve others, and as we serve others, we serve our soul's journey as well. As we go through that experience of being of service, it teaches us and it evolves our own soul. So it's a beautiful it's a beautiful way for us to be able to give selflessly, but then also to be able to grow as a result of that. And as I went through that journey and would take this music and meditation practices into the corporate world with that corporate hat that I still sometimes pop on when the need arises. I run wellness programs and wellbeing programs in the corporate market, but I do it and I meet them where they're at, and then I bring them into this space and I let them experience it without any attachment. They might not like it, they might like it. And ultimately, with the overall goal is that they step into that essence of what it means to be, or what it feels like to switch off for just a little while and to be in that state of peace and calm. Peaceful solutions is really where we need to get to, and we do that at an individual level. But if we're too busy and we're unable to even be able to experience what that feels like, well, that's where we lose that sense of freedom. And there was in the question of personal freedom in this article as well, he wrote that our choice is twofold, between recognizing the unconscious forces of the mass mind and aiming for the personal development of our awareness to act as individuals. Freedom is a question of our responsibility, and our responsibility is likewise a question of our freedom. And he quoted in here a Swedish diplomat, Dag Hammarskjöld, I hope I said that right, Hammarskjöld, wrote in his diary, "I don't know who or what put the question. I don't know when it was put. I don't even remember answering. But at some moment, I did answer yes to someone or something. And from that hour, I was certain that existence is meaningful, and that therefore my life is self-surrender, had a goal." You see, the responsibility of freedom for Hammarskjöld was about saying yes to the unknown, to the ineffable source of trust in oneself. And I think that's extremely profound and meaningful when you look deeper into that. And it's about the more that we start to say yes to that and trusting and building that relationship with, whether you want to call it source or God, I refer to it as God, whatever it is you feel that higher, something bigger than us. You've got to have rocks in your head to think that we're just landed here and that's it, because we're on a floating planet that's revolving around a burning sun, and everything's floating in this galaxy of universes. Like it's beautiful creation, and it really is limiting our view to think that there is nothing beyond the physical meat suit. And that's it. I think that we have to be open, and like I always refer to Aristotle saying that it is that mark of an educated mind to entertain a thought without necessarily accepting it. We need to, I feel as a culture, as a collective, in part of our evolutionary path of self is to allow our blinders and even when we are and this is what I mean, even in the spiritual development self, we need to remove those blinders and open up our perspective without necessarily accepting it or letting ourselves be identified with it or creating an us and them. which is also what I've seen in that new age space and spiritual space, that there's an us and them, and then we're totally going against everything that we stand for, which is pretty much the same, when we talk about the segregation of belief systems, which come in the form of sometimes religions, and that, it's our God and your God. We're all heading to the same path, and in all reality, none of us are getting out alive. So, let's just work together, and you only need to post something about a controversial topic to see, to see how hugely diverse our opinions can be, and how intent we become on that one belief system, and that becomes, I think, a bit of a window into how much we, as a humanity, the issues that we face, that we're not able to entertain a thought without necessarily accepting it. And hey, I'm not perfect at this myself. So, it's a really interesting sort of path and journey. And hey Jem, how are you? Lovely to see you. Of course, I remember you. You were that beautiful woman that supported me in trying to look for my dog Mac. Thank you so much for gifting your time that day. Very, very selfless of you. I really do appreciate that time in my life. That was a beautiful time. I'll share that story in a little bit more detail in another session one time. But lovely to see you here. So that's really the topic, I think, or the food for thought, if you like, about where am I limiting where am I not practicing that discernment, that spiritual discernment of self, and how does that interrelate with my physical experience as being a human, and how do I find that level of the place in the middle of spiritual maturity. And I feel that spiritual maturity comes from age, it comes from experience. You go through all these different things, but it also, I've seen many people who have been through in the spiritual world for most of their lives, and there's no maturity there. In fact, there's more ego than there's maturity. And some people are just wired that way, and that's where they're going to take it. But what I invite you to do is to become, as a practical takeaway from this, is to become the observer of yourself and be discerning. And if you need to, create a visual of us as kids in a candy shop, and we're in that kindergarten phase of just learning our way. We're figuring it out. We're all just figuring it out as we go. There's no rule book. And if we can practice a higher sense of awareness when we are looking and delving into our spiritual practices, or if we go to healings, or if we do these certain practices, or if you come to one of my sound sessions, I think that it's how you start to build that muscle, that spiritual muscle and that only comes with trusting more. So trusting your internal GPS system more. How do you do that? Does it feel light in my body, or does it feel heavy? And sometimes it can come through as a feeling. When you've walked into a room, you can feel that it feels off or it feels good. It's practicing that. So the more that you start to practice that, do it with simple things, with food, with what you're going to wear, with when you're driving the car, with people that you connect with your conversations. Start to build that muscle. Same as you would go to a gym, you would build up your muscles, and you wouldn't stop when you get to a certain point and go, yeah, I'm done now. I don't ever need to go to a gym again. And sometimes that happens, but then, then gravity takes over and things change. And so but the point I'm making is you've got to keep working that muscle. You've got to keep working that spiritual discernment, and not taking every single thing as gospel just because it might be spiritual, or also making sure that you're not stepping into a space of ego. When you are doing these things, when you are practicing these practices. And it also starts with looking at the shadow elements of self. Shadow elements of self are those parts of us we don't really like. We don't really, and I still do this today. I still find parts in me, and I actually said it to a friend the other day, I don't like my mini reaction to that, which was my first subconscious reaction, which then the spiritual self said, no, love and light, and it's kind of like, yeah, sometimes it's love and light, and sometimes it's just like, okay, we need to move out of this, or we need to move on. And it's having that healthy understanding of what is healthy for your emotional, spiritual self and what is unhealthy for that. And being courageous enough to speak your truth, to say that does not feel right for me. If the time is right, not to just blurt it out because you think by being truthful somehow it gives you a gold star. No, you've got to find that balance between, again, that spatial awareness. So when is the right time to speak and share, and when is the other time to be quiet in it and to process it yourself without an audience. And these are the acts of spiritual maturity that will come. And then as you experience all these different, modalities, if you like, that work for you, and you go through them and you'll figure out what works for you and what doesn't. And again, watching yourself. Are you now limiting that if there's something that you didn't like about a certain practice? Are you now judging everybody else who goes to that? Therefore creating a mini institutionalization of your belief system. So those are some of the elements, if you like, of spiritual maturity. And I could talk to it all night, but we haven't got all night. And I'm sure that it's probably time to stop. But I find it a really fascinating topic. I revel in watching people grow in their spiritual maturity. I love to watch the journey for them, and if I need to be of service in some way, then I am. Or I watch other people be in service to them, and that's where we build those bridges, and as we do that, we're connecting those little kind of connections. They're all happening all the time, and then it creates a ripple effect. And then what happens is, as a collective culture, we evolve into that consciousness that we have now created. And some get left behind, and some move on, and some transition, and some then move into that. And that's what we're facing at the moment, is this more and more people they're calling it waking up, but we're already awake. But we're moving into, and closer, if you like, into a higher level of ourself, of a newer version of self. And we've done it as a collective by doing it as an individual. So I invite you to start that practice in some way, to start watching your discernment. And just because someone spiritual has said something to you, it doesn't, and saying that, Spirit told me this, or this was my guidance, it doesn't mean it's right for you. Practice your discernment. Be grounded in your spiritual approach. And when I say be grounded, I say listen to your internal guidance system. It will be the only thing. And sometimes, a lot of the time, you might get it wrong, but that's the practice. Okay, so you might fall and you go, oh, geez, I thought I knew that person, or I thought I made a good judgment call on that person and I got it wrong, but then maybe you didn't, because everything happens. If it wouldn't have happened if it didn't. It wouldn't never have happened if it wasn't meant to. And it was part of the assignment. It was part of your learning as you start to build that muscle. And as you build it more and more, then it becomes second nature, and you trust it wholeheartedly, to the point, which is what I've done, where I completely changed my entire life. I did a whole 360 because I trusted that so much. And I trusted that, and it came at a big cost. Everything got stripped, every single thing, money, finance, identity, everything. And had to start again, but I had to always trust. And I had moments of doubt. I was like, oh my God, what have I done? But I still had this knowing. It was this knowing, and I call it the voice. And it's like this voice of source energy, a source voice, God's voice would guide me, and I would trust that. And that voice, in some ways, you can call it God, you can call it higher self, or you can call it your internal GPS system. It was the thing that I'd continue to trust, even against if I'm in a room with 20 other people and they think the opposite. I will still stand by what my inner voice tells me. And I invite you to do the same and watch your life evolve and your path go down a direction you would never have ever imagined. bigger than your imagination could hold. And I hope you all have a beautiful weekend. And as we wrap up tonight, as usual, we wrap up tonight with a beautiful, hopefully beautiful, meditation session. And so as I begin this, I invite you to just close your eyes or you can have your eyes open and sit in a meditative position as we begin. And as we do begin, we're just going to bring ourselves back to our breath. And as we bring ourselves back to our breath, we notice how our body's feeling. We notice if there's any tightness in the body. We absorb the teachings and we seal it in with the following meditation. as we bring ourselves into the awareness of our bodies, and we welcome in the sealing of our teachings tonight. We imagine a golden light pouring down over our heads, our shoulders, like water, washing away the old. And as that golden light moves through our body into the cells of our bodies, it grounds us through our feet, moving through into the core of our planet, like the roots of a tree moving down into the core of Mother Nature. Within the center of this core, and we see a crystal. The roots wrap around this crystal as it connects in with the center of our being, of our soul. And as we connect in with that, we feel the surge of energy moving up through our feet, our legs, our arms, connecting in with our heart center. And as the heart center begins to move in a clockwise direction, we can begin to feel the essence of love. It radiates out into a bright white light. Tema. ourselves one people and stay united. All of us, all of us, all of us, all of us, all of us. And as we radiate that love and light energy from our heart center, we radiate that in as a collective into the center of Mother Earth, generating a healing and a support for all that she holds. For all that she holds and all the pain and suffering that she endures on our behalf. As a result, she is at the mercy of our hands. We take this moment to send her love, gratitude. We see this radiating light in the center of the earth as it begins to radiate outwards, filling up the seas and the lands, the mountains and the skies, under every rock and under every leaf. We gift the frequency of love to this place that we call home. We take in a deep breaths. As we hold within us the spiritual discernment and awareness that will guide us and support us as we are held in the arms of light. And it is done. And it is done. And it is done. And as we bring ourselves back, connecting in with the energy and the frequency that surrounds us. I give to you the essence of tonight's teaching as an invitation for embodiment to practice in your daily world and in your reality. I think it worked on my dog, she's snoring. Thank you, everyone. I hope that tonight's teaching was of some use to you and you feel as relaxed as my snoring dog. Enjoy your evening, everybody, and if you are in Perth, then come and join us for July sold out, but August is still available for the sound meditation. experience, which is a little bit like this, but a way deeper experience for the collective healing of our planet and of our human family. I welcome you to join us in August and experience it. I've left the links in the comment fields. Alternatively, there's some other information there if you want some one-on-one sessions of Ascension or spiritual directorship, or you would like to do a sound meditation journey at home. There's an online version too. And these are all my offerings to you to support you in building that next version and creating that bridge for yourself, so then you can pass it on to someone else to assist them in walking into that which we always were. Many blessings upon all of you. Much love, much light. Have a wonderful weekend. Enjoy practicing your spiritual discernment. Stay grounded and aware. Much love. Take care.